Hey, hi, howdy. You know what I love about Team Fortress 2 weapons? Their utility. Most weapons in TF2 offer something to fill a certain niche that the default stock weapons struggle with. Like the direct hit. This thing makes it way easier to hit direct hits, and it rewards you for hitting enemies in the air. Oh, what about the Quickie Bomb Launcher? That allows you to charge sticky bombs way faster, giving your stickies way more range at much faster speeds. I also love how these weapons are perfectly balanced. Most good TF2 weapons have downsides that make the weapon's upsides fair. Circling back to the direct hit, yes, hitting direct hits is easier now, but it gets rid of your splash damage, making direct hits your only option. The Quickie Bomb Launcher does let you shoot out your stickies at longer ranges faster, but you can't have as many stickies out at once. This, along with the reduced damage from individual sticky bombs, means that you need to be more strategic with this launcher. Sticky spam won't work with it. Now, I know you're probably wondering, wow, TF2 weapons sound amazing! There can't possibly be anything wrong with them! And if you're thinking that, I implore you to think back to 20 seconds ago when I said most good weapons. Which brings us to this thing. This is the Pain Train. I do not like the Pain Train. But why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because this moldy twig goes against everything I consider fun and unique about TF2's weapon design. And I'm tired of pretending it's okay. So let's take a deep dive into this thing and learn why it truly is the most confusing weapon in TF2. In my opinion. This is all my opinion. If you love the Pain Train, that's good for you, man. This isn't serious. The Pain Train is a community-created melee weapon for the soldier and the demo man. It is a broken wooden handle bottom wrapped with dark tape and... Look, I could sit here and read the wiki, or I could give you the basic rundown. Of course, the basic rundown was already covered in the first sentence in that bit, making my own rundown useless along with this extra explanation useless, but who cares? The Pain Train is a melee weapon shared between the soldier and the demo man. This makes it one of 3 non-stock weapons to be shared between classes, the others being the Panic Attack and the Half Zatoichi. Zatoichi? I don't know. The Pain Train is ungodly simple. It only has 2 stats after all. For now, we're going to be focusing on the first stat, and it's, in my opinion, the weirdest weapon stat in all of TF2. +1 capture rate on wearer. Now, for the uninitiated, this probably makes 0 sense, but it's pretty straightforward. Basically, this means that the Pain Train counts you as an extra person when capturing a control point or pushing the payload cart. This means that when the Pain Train is equipped, you will be capping the objective faster. Now, this isn't a bad stat, it's actually pretty good. In theory. Yes, it is definitely more effective when pushing the payload cart to count as 2 people, similar to a scout, but is it really that more effective? Okay, this is the part where I tell you how much faster it is in seconds to cap a point, but every map with control points has entirely different values for how fast points are capped, and I'm not going through every map. However, the payload cart does have a specific speed in which it can be pushed.
And it maxes out at 3 players.
This means that this thing is worthless on payload if you have either A, 2 other teammates pushing the cart, or B, a single scout pushing the cart. In my experience, heavies and scouts usually stick close to the cart, so that makes the Pain Train useless on payload. 90% of the time, there's going to be no reason to use this stupid thing in this game mode. The one upside it brings to the table is useless in payload most of the time. But that makes me wonder, how does it fare in other game modes? Well, I am so happy I asked that question. Out of the 5 primary game modes, the Pain Train's usability varies. Let's start with arguably TF2's most popular casual game mode, Capture the Flag. The Pain Train is horrible in Capture the Flag. Yeah, +1 capture rate means the Pain Train doesn't actually do anything in Capture the Flag, which of course means out of the 5 main modes in TF2, this weapon is unusable in one of them. It also means that the Pain Train is the objective worst weapon to choose in Capture the Flag, as it's the only weapon that's upsides don't work in that game mode. I think. I'm too lazy to check, but I'm pretty sure. Now for Attack Defend. The Pain Train is weird in this one. First off, it is the same problem as payload, though not as bad. Capture rates stop at 4 players, so if there's 3 people with you or Scout and his +1, the Pain Train is once again entirely disposable. I don't think it's as bad as Payload, just because it's more likely that you'll have 2 people with you than 3, but it's still going to make this thing useless most of the time. On a complicated map like Steel, I can totally see the value in the Pain Train. I've definitely capped points alone on that map, but on most other attack-defend maps, you're going to be backed up by 11 other people. I genuinely can't see the value in this thing most of the time, considering your team will most likely be with you when capturing a point. But hey, let's say that your team isn't with you. This thing is still entirely up in the air on if it's worth running or not. I said it before, but maps all have entirely different amounts of time required to capture a point. There really is no happy medium here. On a map like Dust Bowl, where it's lightning fast to cap a point, why would you use this thing? Even if you're alone, it's going to be incredibly fast to cap the point, with or without the Pain Train. And if you're on a map where it takes several years of your life to cap a point, like on Moss Rock, well, it's going to take a long time. Using the Pain Train won't help much, and on these types of maps, your team will always be with you. Now, I know you're probably wondering why I didn't show any footage of me capturing a point on Moss Rock, and I'll tell you why. The Pain Train's viability on these maps isn't exclusively dictated by the map, it's also determined by which position you hold. If you're on the defending side on an attack-defend map or payload map, this thing is objectively horrific to use. There is no point to cap, so you'd be handicapping yourself by using this thing on defense no matter what. I could barely find any casual Moss Rock servers, and when I did, I got defense. Oh, but there are several weapons in TF2 that are more useful on offense than on defense. Why would the Pain Train be any different? Well, I'll tell you. Let's look at the weapons that I'm sure people immediately think of when they think this one's for offense and this one's for defense. The Gunslinger and the Rescue Ranger. Is it true that these two are way more tailored for a certain position than the other? Yes, but that doesn't stop you from using them entirely. The Rescue Ranger won't be as effective on offense, but at least you can still use it. None of its features are locked off because of the position you are on. Same goes for the Gunslinger. There's nothing stopping you from slapping mini sentries down when defending. The Pain Train, though? This broken railway track has absolutely nothing going for it when defending. With that being said, King of the Hill and 5CP are the best game modes for this thing. Only because you can capture points on both teams. It doesn't matter if you're blue or red, this thing will offer you some use when in these game modes. Sadly though, these are the only 2 main game modes that the Pain Train is usable in all of the time. In every other game mode, the Pain Train is either worthless half the time or all the time. And I don't think a weapon barely being usable makes it good. Going back to payload, I know some people may have been asking themselves one simple question. But what if you're the only person pushing the cart, or there's one other person pushing? And hey, if you're the only person pushing the cart, then this thing is pretty good in payload. But why would you be doing that? This thing is exclusively used by Soldier and Demo Man. Why? In other game modes, this isn't a big deal, as usually an entire team will be capping a point, but in payload, Soldiers and Demo Men should not be the ones pushing the cart exclusively. They are designed to be up close to the action and getting lots of kills. If they're pushing the cart, they should be with their team, which would make the Pain Train useless again. And a lot of the time, though this is definitely a personal issue for me, I get sidetracked when I'm pushing the cart, which makes me a wonderful target for spies. I genuinely think that Heavy would have been an infinitely better character to receive the Pain Train, just because he can constantly rev and get ammo back from the payload cart, which means he's great at pushing it. Hell, give it to Pyro too. That way the single fire buddies can be the ones capping the objective. By now, I think you can see that I'm not too fond of the Pain Train. I think it's silly that this thing only works like a third of the time, and even then that's dependent on if your team members are with you or not. And most importantly, I don't even think that capping a little bit faster is even that impactful, especially when it's likely that you're not going to be capping alone. There is more, however. Remember all the way at the beginning of this video, I said that this weapon has 2 stats? Well, that other stat doesn't exactly make things better. But what is this fabled weapon statistic that I'm teasing? Well, all will be revealed right after the sponsor of this video.
Hey, I'm Donnie Ladderwheel, and I'm here to introduce the sponsor of today's video. Introducing 10% bullet damage vulnerability on Wearer. With 10% bullet damage vulnerability on Wearer, you'll be more vulnerable to the most prominent type of damage in the whole game. And don't worry, it gets better. You won't ever have to worry about leaving the house without 10% bullet damage vulnerability on Wearer ever again, because it's a passive effect. meaning you'll be able to chill with 10% bullet damage vulnerability on wearer for the whole match. And if you purchase 10% bullet damage vulnerability on wearer now, we'll give you a faster death to a sentry for absolutely nothing extra. Order now and use code ThisWeaponSucks to get 40% off your next order.
Yes, the one downside to being able to cap points faster is having a permanent 10% bullet damage vulnerability the entire match. As long as you have the Pain Train equipped, you are going to take more damage from the most prominent damage type in the game. Every class except Demo Man has a weapon that's damage is classified as bullet damage. And yes, I checked, the syringe gun is counted as bullet damage. The only class that doesn't have any bullet damage weapons is Demo Man, so that makes you weaker towards 8 out of 9 classes in the whole game. Being weaker against a type of damage nearly every class has access to is one thing, but this is an entirely passive ability. Even though the only upside is only active when capping a point or pushing a cart, which maybe pushing a cart is something you'll do for a lot of the game, but capping a point is a very small fragment of your match. An upside only doing anything for maybe a total of 1 minute depending on the map, while the downside is active the entire game is so stupid. The whole damn match, you're going to be in a weaker state just so you can cap last a little bit quicker. If we look back at the direct hit, both the weapon's downsides and upsides are only in effect when using the weapon. Comparing the Pain Train to another weapon with a damage vulnerability, the Claymore, this thing has a 15% damage vulnerability to all damage types, but the upside of this weapon is giving you a longer charge. Charging as a Demo Knight is something you're going to be doing constantly throughout the game. It isn't something that you do once and then you don't do it for the next 10 minutes, making the damage vulnerability justified. Looking back at the Pain Train, it makes you vulnerable, even though the upside will only come into play like 3 times a match. Maybe more if you're actively pushing the payload cart, but I already discussed how Demo and Soldier shouldn't be glued to the damn thing. Now I know that a 10% bullet vulnerability isn't that bad, but it's still a downside, and it makes you weaker. I could go through every bullet damage weapon and calculate how much damage they'll be doing, but is that even necessary? You die faster using this thing. That's it. That's all that really matters here. The main thing that will kill you faster are heavies and sentries, as they do have sustained fire, but you will die to literally everything faster. Or at the very least, you'll be stumbling around the map with less health than usual. A 10% weakness to bullets really isn't the end of the world, but why keep that weakness on you the entire game just to cap a little faster when I've already discussed that that stat will be worthless if you have a handful of other people with you on the point or cart. For a last little ramble, I'd like to come back to something I said at the beginning of this video. I stated that the Pain Train goes against everything I consider good, fun, and unique about TF2's weapon design. What did I mean about this? Well, I'll tell you. The Pain Train doesn't actively do anything to make it fun to use. It's not enjoyable or engaging to see the cart go faster or see the point get capped quicker. That's not what makes a weapon fun in TF2. Making a weapon fun means the weapon should have stats that make using it inherently more enjoyable. The Pain Train doesn't do this. It just has an upside that sounds good on paper but falls apart when you look at it for even a second. It's one of the only weapons in the game that exclusively has passive stats, the others being the Razorback, Darwin's Danger Shield, Cozy Camper, Gunboats, Booties, and Candy Cane. I'm pretty sure that's all of them, but I might have missed some. A passive stat, to me anyway, is a stat that doesn't require you to take the weapon out or actively use it in order to activate said stat. The Overdose allows you to go faster, but you need to have it out to do so, which doesn't make that stat passive. A damage penalty also isn't passive as it affects the weapon that you're using, like on the Sun on a Stick. These passive weapons I listed are almost all similar in that you can't actually use them. They're just equipped and they do what they need to do. The Candy Cane is an exception, but it does spawn small health packs on the ground after a kill, which is something you can interact with. The Pain Train doesn't actually give you any positive feedback for using it. The upside and downside will be in full play during a match even if you never switch to the thing. And that makes it so unsatisfying to use. The upside can be useful, the downside isn't that bad, but this is definitely one of my least favorite TF2 weapons. Let's conclude, shall we? The Pain Train is a melee weapon that allows you to capture objectives faster. It's only usable on classes that should be in the front lines rather than capping. It's only usable in certain positions, and its usability is entirely dependent on the map, game mode, and position that you're playing on. I can see the value in this thing, but only sometimes. It's objectively horrible half the time and doesn't provide any positive feedback to encourage people to keep using it. I hate the Pain Train. Using it isn't fun, it's not worth equipping, and after this video, I will never use it ever again. It's painful. Also, why does the paint tray not have a min mode view model for Demo Man? What the hell?